We're talking productive struggle in dynasty leagues, and the show is going to start right now. Welcome back. It's Bob's Three-Toed Warriors from Studio 1329 with Word on the Street, Season 1, Episode 23. And today I'm on the show. We're talking about productive struggle in dynasty leagues. That sounds like a terrible thing. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We're going to find out today. I have what I would say is the expert on productive struggle joining me on the show today, none other than Mr. Ryan McDowell. Mr. McDowell, how you doing today, sir? What's the word?
Doing well, man. Glad to be on here with you. Glad to talk some dynasty. Ready to go.
Awesome. I appreciate you coming on the show, sir. I've been listening to your show for several years. Why don't you let listeners find out here where they can find your work?
Sure. You can find most of my work at DLF, dynastyleaguefootball.com. Also doing some work for Roto World again this year, covering dynasty for them. And you can find me on Twitter at RyanMC23.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right. So if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're listening on the podcast audio, be kind, subscribe. A little 5-star ratings, always very, very helpful. And yesterday, which won't be yesterday when you hear this, but yesterday, we did our first fantasy football hump day happy hour. Went off pretty well. It was a good time. People got to jump in, ask some questions. So that's on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time. All right, so productive struggle. Let's just get on into this. What in the world does that term mean for those of us who are not familiar with productive struggle?
Sure. So I am actually a teacher in as my day job. And so productive struggle is an education term. Essentially refers to letting students struggle, letting them kind of figure it out on their own. And of course, just like fantasy football, that's not a strategy you would always want to use as a teacher. It's not foolproof. But there are times when it fits. There are times when it makes sense and when it can be productive for the student. So several years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago, I was sitting in a training at the end of the school year, honestly kind of mentally checked out, ready for summer vacation, and thinking about fantasy football and my dynasty teams and everything else. And the speaker is going on, and she says the term productive struggle. And I mean, it hit me, and automatically I knew that's what I do in dynasty, because how I had typically been building teams in startup drafts was focus on youth, focus on the wide receiver position, acquire extra draft picks, trade down in the draft, not trade up. And usually that meant losing the first year. I didn't have a lot of success in that first season, but it was basically by design. It was intentional. And that gave me a high draft pick the next year. And if I had done a good job in the startup acquiring those young players that could turn into something in year 2 and beyond, then I was ready to contend that second year. So I wrote an article called Productive Struggle, based around the idea of productive struggle for DLF. I think that was 2014. And it really took off. I mean, for the most part, it was a strategy that a lot of people were doing, focusing on young players in dynasty, even the being willing to lose, or you could say tank if you want. That was fairly common at that point. But putting that terminology around it, kind of wrapping it all into that one package, I think made a lot of sense for people.
Okay. All right. I like it. That's a good explanation. So here's a question for you. I'm going to flip my order of these questions. So do you associate it with team rebuilds, or is it a decision you make in a draft or pre-draft? Is it only on one side of the fence or the other, or is it used both?
Yeah, I mean, I typically think about it as a strategy you use in the startup draft. I know it's kind of become a term that a lot of people use when their team is no good, when their team is rebuilding. unfortunately, not every bad team is a productive struggle team. You've got to have that plan in place. And again, like I said, with education, that doesn't mean the plan always works. It doesn't mean you're going to nail it every time. I've had teams where I got last place in year 1 and I won the title in year 2. Like, that's happened. But I've had teams go the wrong way. Last place in year 1 and maybe maybe I move up a spot or 2 in year 2. But it's a longer process. Typically, though, I don't necessarily think of it as a rebuilding strategy or a term I would use with a rebuilding team. I think of it more as a startup draft strategy.
Sure, because your rebuild team that's just tanking, right? You're tanking to get those picks. You're trading away your old players to get that draft capital or those younger guys. It's
right. I mean, it could, you could still certainly use that term because if you're intentionally struggling, if you're trading away Julio Jones and Drew Brees and even I think we could even put like Travis Kelce in that group now.
Sure.
If you're trading those guys away with an eye towards 2021, 2022 and beyond, and you've got that plan in place, then sure, that could definitely be a productive struggle team. But if your team just stinks and you're not really being proactive about it, that's not a productive struggle team. You're just a struggling team without the productive. Yeah,
that's a team just looking for that goodwill donation slip for the end of the year.
Yeah.
Just giving away those league fees. So what's your determining factor when you're deciding that it's time to go productive struggle? So I think the way I'm thinking of this is, I don't know how often you do startups. How many leagues are you in? I am curious.
Yeah, I've joined a bunch this off season just with the circumstances and
COVID babies
at home. Yeah, I mean, I've fallen into the trap like a lot of other people. I'm probably around 20, maybe. Okay. Yeah, something like that.
All right, you're not totally out of control yet, so
not too crazy yet.
Yeah, all right. I was up to 14 last year, and I'm at a solid 5 this year, and I'm pretty content.
Oh, nice.
I'm staying strong. Twitter's asking, "Hey, you want to join this one?" I'm like, no.
It's tough. It's tough to have the willpower.
It is, especially when it's a tempting style of a league that maybe you're not in or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so when you did these startups, did you walk into the startup saying, "Boom, I'm going productive struggle, I'm going win now," or did you let the first 2-3 rounds and what you grabbed in those first 2-3 rounds dictate kind of which way you're going to lean? How does that usually work for someone who's going to walk into a draft and wants to make up their, like, what would they do? What would you do?
I mean, I would always basically go, well, what's happened? Again, that article I think was 2014. So if you look at 2014 dynasty ADP and 2014 redraft ADP, they look very, very different. And you could look at a draft and know if it was a dynasty draft or a redraft. I don't think you could do that today. A lot of the same, you're going to see a lot of the same players in the first couple rounds. So I think a lot of people, and I mean, I won't give myself credit for this. I think this is just kind of the trend of how fantasy has gone. I think a lot of people are treating their redraft teams kind of not with the dynasty mentality necessarily, but they're not afraid to take the younger player. They're not afraid to avoid an older player. We're noticing those trends of when aging players are kind of falling off the cliff. So, I mean, you'll still see Julio Jones in round 2 of redraft leagues. And obviously that's a solid pick at that point. But examples like that are kind of few and far between. For the most part, those drafts are looking very similar. So when I'm doing drafts now, I think it's easy to focus on acquiring younger players. That's what everybody's doing. And that means those veterans are falling. So some of those key pieces of the productive struggle model have kind of become commonplace now. So all of that to say, I think you can focus on youth and still win immediately. So I don't necessarily go into a league knowing I'm going to lose in year one, but as far as the base of young players, that remains the same. I don't want to take declining assets. Like
Sure.
No matter what Julio Jones does this year, and I keep going to that example.
It's a great example, though. He's probably got 2-3 strong years, we assume, left.
Right. No matter what no matter what he does, I mean, he could have 1,400 yards and a dozen touchdowns. He's still going to lose dynasty value. That's just the nature of the hobby. So I'm not taking Julio Jones. I'm not taking Travis Kelce. He's going to lose dynasty value in the coming year. And that's kind of you want to find players that are going to be productive. Obviously, you want to compete in most years. But you also have to have your eye on value, because if you load up on guys like that, even if you do have success in year one, you get to year two and your team is on its way to falling apart, and you have no assets to improve that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And feel like more running backs are sliding higher into the rookie, or into the not rookie. Well, yes, the rookie drafts, but the dynasty drafts than they probably were in 2014 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's another change we're seeing. It's, it was dark times if you were a running back supporter, or, I was looking at some ADP today, and Thomas Rawls was a top 7 running back at one point. I think that was in 2015. That's just one example, but that just shows how lacking the running back position was overall. And then, 2016, we get Zeke and we get Derrick Henry. And then we know what happened in 2017, McCaffrey and Kamara and Hunt and Cook and Mixon and Fournette. And now the whole landscape has changed because of that. So yeah, absolutely. We're seeing, we saw balance for a couple of years, and now we're seeing it shift towards the running backs, that you take running backs in the first couple rounds, and then you can get your wide receivers, in 3 through 10, really. So if I wrote productive struggle today, it would look different. The drafting plan would be different.
All right. Sounds like you have homework then.
That's right. I probably do.
I just gave homework to a teacher. All right. So real quick, listener league promotion. So we have 3 spots remaining for the listener league. It's going to be an auction league, 12-teamer. 2 spots for 5-star reviews that you screenshot and send to @Bob's3Toad on Twitter. And then the last thing will be a comment, a story, song. I don't care what it is. Something entertaining that says why you deserve to be in the listener league and includes something from the show. So get those in, because that window is a closing, because there is maybe going to be a season, and we want to be able to have some fun and play in it. So it'll be here before we know it. Tell us about some of the projects you are working on. You rattled off a beautiful list of things that you're involved in, but tell us a little bit about some of them.
Sure. Quite a few of them, actually. So about a year ago, I became a part owner at DLF. And since then, I would say my writing has decreased, just the amount of writing I do, but involved a lot more in kind of the behind the scenes work at DLF. We have recently released the My DLF tool, which basically syncs up our trade analyzer tool with your My Fantasy League information, your team, your competitors' teams, and really just helps you come up with the perfect trades across all of your MFL leagues. So that's been a huge thing that we've been working on as a group, and already working on adjustments and changes for that. There on the side, I've got a 2021 Dynasty rookie mock coming out soon, looking ahead to the 21 class. And then, like I said, doing some work for Roto World, writing up running backs and wide receivers, doing top 200 Dynasty rankings over there. It's keeping me busy.
For those of, and I'm sure most listeners are, especially this time of season, but those of people out there who aren't familiar with what DLF means, what it is, or Roto World, in a couple sentences, what would you say what are those?
Sure. DLF, Dynasty League Football. We like to think of ourselves as the preeminent Dynasty League site, founded by three guys hanging around in their kitchen about 15 years ago. And they, like so many of us, were just hardcore Dynasty players and thought, there's nothing out there for us, so let's just do it ourselves. Sure. And like a lot of sites and like a lot of small businesses, they struggled for a long time. And then as Dynasty continued to grow and become popular, it was like the light clicked on. And we've been growing every year. Our writing team is up to 50 or 60 at this point. We actually purchased FF Statistics, which was a great site founded by Addison Hayes. Purchased that last year, so we've added tools to all the other content and rankings and ADP data that you can find at DLF. So if you play in a Dynasty League, you need to check out DLF for sure. And then RotoWorld is the fantasy football site, not just fantasy football, fantasy sports site for all sports associated with NBC. And I think most people think of RotoWorld because of player blurbs. They are the best site around when it comes to player news. If you're wondering about what's going on with the player, you can check on RotoWorld, check on that news feed, and they've got you covered. But I'm part of their content team there, covering Dynasty, as I said, and a lot of great folks over there covering fantasy football, baseball, basketball, everything.
Awesome. So you mentioned player news, and at the time of this recording, this week, pretty much off and on and so forth, Mr. Antonio Brown is retired, unretired. The official Twitter tweets that somehow count as official, unofficial. What's your take on Mr. Brown?
It's kind of a sad situation from an outsider's perspective because it's similar to what we saw last summer with the flip-flopping of his plans and his intentions. So I'm still not confident he ever plays again, honestly. If he does play again, obviously instant value. I mean, we saw him that one game with the Patriots, basically turned into their leading receiver off the streets. So if he gets a chance, I mean, that's all he needs to produce. But between the NFL and legal issues and honestly just his own struggles, I'm not sure we ever see him again.
Yeah, good point. And then if he does come back in and you're shooting at him in redraft, he's supposed to get some kind of suspension, allegedly, probably, right? Handful of games, couple games, something like that. Maybe will to be determined. So additional risk for you if you're grabbing.
It seems like the NFL's been pretty quiet on that. His ADP was certainly creeping up. We just finished the Scott Fishbowl drafts, so we've got 120 drafts of data to look at, and he was a popular target in that before this week with the tweets and retiring and coming back and accusing the NFL of slow playing everything to be kind.
Sure.
He was coming off the board in like early double-digit rounds, 10th to 12th round, sometimes falling a little further than that. And that's probably a fair range to take a chance on him. Because like I said, if he comes back, if he gets reinstated, he's a fantasy starter immediately and possibly an impact fantasy starter. So, yeah, that's probably where I would be looking to take a shot on him at this point.
Okay. All right. And some other in the news type stuff is the COVID season. So for your leagues or leagues you've heard of and ideas you've heard of, how are you treating it for your league? So we're talking about, first off, maybe for like the weekly schedule. Are you sticking head to head? Are you adding it, flipping it? Are you going against the mean? Is there any consensus? You're in 20 different leagues, so there's probably 20 different opinions going on, but what's your feelings, or what's your preference? Maybe more even than what you've seen, but
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's so much to consider, and out of those 20 or so leagues, I commish 10 or 12 of them. So those are all decisions that I'm going to have to make for my leagues with the input of the folks that are in those leagues for sure. Next week, Scott Fish and I have a special episode of our Commission Impossible podcast. We're bringing on some other guys from around the industry that are also commissioners in their own leagues, basically having kind of a roundtable, what to do with all of these things in relation to COVID. What happens if they cancel the season? What do you do? What happens if they get a handful of games in and then have to cancel? So I feel like I'm going to have better answers for you on all of this probably next week. But as far as the schedule, I think it makes a lot of sense to do, possibly just a best ball schedule. I've seen some leagues doing double headers. So if you normally play just one game a week for the first 13 weeks, maybe you play double headers to try to get some extra games in before the league potentially has to end the season early. That's been a common thought, is maybe they get 4 games in, they get 6 games in, but it seems like very few people at this point expect a full 16 game season plus playoffs. So I think using double headers makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think we were going to push for your regular schedule plus playing against the mean, against the average. So if you're top 6, you got the win. If you're bottom 6, you took the extra loss. So that seemed like a pretty fair way to do it. And then the next question is, what do you do with the playoffs, depending on how short it goes, right? So if you only end up with a 4-game season, it's a hell of a short season. And, a lot of people have the same record. So that's where your best ball scoring, would have to come into effect, or at what point you just scrap a season.
Yeah, well, I play a lot of my leagues on MFL, my fantasy league, and they have basically said that they're going to charge if we get half a season in. So if we get 8 games in, and I think that's a pretty good bar to set for fantasy leagues as well. If they only play 4 games, you can't
judge.
Yeah, you can't crown a champion based on that. You can't do payouts. So if you're talking about a redraft league, I think at that point you just refund everybody's money, come back in 2021 and hope this thing is done by then. In a dynasty league, which most of my leagues are, it's completely different. You've got some other options. I'd still probably refund, but you can continue with and almost treat it like an extended off season, as far as, you still open trades, you still open waivers, things like that.
And then in the dynasty or in your keeper leagues, maybe for redraft leagues, maybe more in your dynasty, I guess it's impactful, but are you thinking more of a lottery system where the guy came in 12th is getting 12 tickets, the guy got the championship gets 1 ticket, and you pool for draft picks slots, or you freeze them to where they were last year? What would be your preference there?
I think this is probably going to be the biggest discussion for dynasty leagues, is how to determine that draft order. I would not just use the same order as 2020. I would not do that. I think you can do some type of lottery system. You could do some type of tiered, kind of like a bucket system, and then go lottery. So if you've got teams that are always playoff contenders, put them in one group. If you've got teams that miss the playoffs every year, put them in one group. Those teams are fighting for the top picks.
Okay.
Whether it's a lottery system or, just a random draw from those 3 teams. But if you say these 3 teams haven't made the playoffs in the past 3 years, they're going to be 1, 2, and 3 in some order. These 4 teams have made the playoffs the past 3 years. They're going to be 9, 10, 11, 12 in some order. And then, once you group them, then you can make it random. I think that makes a little more sense.
Okay. I like that. It's a little different of a take than what I've heard. you might have a little persuasion to do with the guys who are going to be stuck with the later picks. But, hey, you've done well for yourselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be real about it. If you're making the playoffs every year, if you had a team that you think of as a strong contender for this year, even if there is no season, you can't expect a top pick in 2021. It's just not realistic. So you've got to do what is best for the whole league.
Yeah, that's good to keep the league around and happy, because that's what keeps it around. So last part here, as far as COVID goes. So whether it's redraft or whether it's regular season, player gets COVID. Are you thinking, oh well? Are you setting up extra IR spots? You got a preference on a thought on that side of the disease?
Yeah, it seems like, and I don't have the data on this, but it feels like we've had more serious injuries over the past couple of years anyway. So, originally in my leagues, we had 2 IR spots, and just week after week, I was having people come to me and say, we need more IR spots. This is just not enough. So I was already kind of trending towards unlimited IR spots, right? If you've got a guy on your roster and he goes on the injured reserve list, then why punish the fantasy manager for that? And we're talking dynasty leagues where these guys are out for the year. They're not going to help you.
Yeah.
So with COVID, and we've heard from the league that there will be a COVID list. It'll be a 3-week injury list. I think that helps fantasy leagues a lot. Just that clarity and understanding that, okay, with baseball, we saw it with Juan Soto. Juan Soto's on the COVID list for the next 3 weeks. And you can put him there, you can replace him. So we're probably going to have unlimited IR spots in my leagues.
Okay. All right. I like it. You heard him. All right. So we're going to slide over to some rookie talks here. So what are some of your favorite first, second round rookie running back, wide receiver targets in rookie drafts that are there's a couple that have been kind of dwindling and holding on with the late season thoughts here, and with the preseason being basically canceled. So there's a few of them holding out to later before they do their rookies. What's your any favorite first, second round rookie wide receiver targets?
Well, I think with this class of running backs at the top of the draft, we talked about the 2017 class, how impactful that was with so many running backs entering the league. We saw it with 2014, in 2014 with wide receivers, basically changing the league with that class. And I think this group of running backs could be on that same level again. So, if you ask me for first round running back targets, I'm starting at the top. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is my number 1. I took him at 101 in the only league where I had that top pick. But he, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, all 3 of those guys are players I would certainly be targeting, whether it's rookie draft or a startup draft.
Okay, I like it. What about if we're sliding down to the 3rd, 4th round? Any favorite targets in the later rounds for those leagues that will go deeper? Not that that's super deep, but
yeah. So as I was looking at ADP, rookie ADP, and this comes from my fantasy league, rookie leagues. We've got over 800 of them in our data set at DLF. So a huge sample size. It was really running backs that stood out in the first round, those names I mentioned. Mm-hmm. In the second round, it shifts to Visca Chenault there on Edwards in the second round. But in the third round, I think it kind of flips back, at least in part, to running backs. Joshua Kelly is near the top of the third round and could see an immediate role with the Chargers. And then also my guy, I'm a Kentucky football fan, so we don't get many players to cheer for in the NFL, but we're pretty excited about Lynn Bowden, drafted by the Raiders. he was recruited and played at Kentucky as a wide receiver, then shifted to quarterback due to some injuries. And now the Raiders have drafted him as a running back. So, certainly a versatile player. I mean, he led the SEC in rushing, despite only playing 8 games away from the wide receiver position, lined up 8 games as a quarterback and led the SEC in rushing. So pretty special talent. We'll see how he works and how he pairs with Josh Jacobs there.
There you go. I played my first and probably only, at least for now, college league last year, and I picked him up at one point, and I'm like, wait, I can put him in as my running back in the super flex? I'm starting 3 quarterbacks. That was kind of fun.
If you had him, you probably did pretty well.
Yeah, we'll leave it alone.
Okay.
It helped, but unfortunately, my other picks were not as good. So, okay, that'll work. We're gonna move on to another section here. Remind listeners before we move on to the section where you can be found once again. It's on the screen for those watching on the YouTubes, but those listening, it is.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at RyanMC23 and find most of my work at dynastyleaguefootball.com.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right. So we're going to switch our mind. I think you can do this. We're going to switch our mind to redraft for a second. And we're going to talk rookie running backs. And I feel like this first part is easier than the second part. I don't know. Rookie running backs that you're targeting and redraft for this season and why.
I mean, honestly,
they have impact now, basically. So.
Right. So honestly, I want all of the rookie running backs, which is true a lot of the times anyway. As you said, I'm a dynasty guy, so sometimes it's tough to shift that focus when I do play in redraft leagues. But I mean, there's been a overwhelming narrative this offseason over the past month that rookies, this is the year to avoid rookies because of no OTAs, because of no training camp, because of no preseason. Yep. And I absolutely get that. If you're an undrafted kid trying to make the team, you're in trouble, honestly. Yeah. This is just terrible, terrible circumstance, terrible luck for those players. If you're day 3 pick, 6th, 7th rounder, trying to make the rotation, trying to earn carries. Same thing, probably not going to go your way. But when we go back to these running backs that we were talking about, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, and Cam Akers, those are players who were drafted in the first or second round, day 1 or day 2. They've already proven themselves as players on the college level, and in all of their cases, big time college level, SEC, Big Ten, and so on. So I think all 5 of those players, and we could probably go a little deeper with guys like Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm not quite as sold on him, but I'm also not sold on Ronald Jones. So we'll see what Vaughn can do.
Come on, he's bulking up, man. Leave him alone.
Right? Yeah. But any discount that I can get on those players because of COVID, because of the tough transition they might have, I'm absolutely taking that. Clyde is still expensive. He's running back 14. He's going as a second rounder in FFPC ADP, but a lot of the others could be had pretty easily. Cam Akers 50 overall, DeAndre Swift 53 overall, J.K. Dobbins 61 overall. I want them all. I want all those guys.
So here's a question for you. So if you're snagging someone like in redraft, if you're snagging someone like CH, who's so right around the 20th pick, so you're just hitting that turn on the 3rd, are you then gonna handcuff him with the presumed starter? So Damian Williams is showing up as 80th pick, so we're into the 7th round at that point. Are you going to handcuff him so you have the backfield lined up, or not your style? What's your thought there?
Yeah, not necessarily my style, but that's the great thing about all of these situations. Damian Williams in Kansas City, Mack in Indianapolis, Kerryon Johnson, Mark Ingram. we've also seen each of those running backs fall because of the presence of these rookies. So if you are worried about the rookies, if you don't think they can make that transition, it's easy to ignore them and just take the value, take the discount on their veteran teammates instead. So really, no matter what your mindset is or your opinion is on these rookies coming in 2020, you can profit either way, because if you think talent is going to win out and these young guys are great, for the most part, they're going later than they would have if we had training camp and if we had OTAs. But if you're worried about them, just take Marlon Mack and Kerryon Johnson and Damian Williams instead.
Yeah, take Mark Ingram in the end of the 5th round. Mark Ingram from last year, end of the 5th round. That's, if he stays healthy, doesn't get hurt, do they pull him off the field? Unless they're winning by 40 again.
Right. I mean, I do expect a role certainly for Dobbins. But I mean, Mark Ingram's not going away. He's one of the most underrated, undervalued running backs of the past decade or so. He's always there and always producing.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd point that one out, because that one was pretty interesting to me. Especially with Gus Edwards having so many carries last year, you can just slide those over to, real easy. There you go. Here's about 100. All right. So from there, let's go over to rookie wide receivers that you would be willing to take the shot on. No keeper league. No keeper league. You can't even hold them for next year. I want to remove that from you, because keeper league, it's always easy to take that shot and just bury that one guy. But you've only got him for this year.
Yeah, this one is tougher. And I do think that the case can be made that everything that's gone on the past few months does affect wide receivers more than it might affect running backs. So you look at the top rookie wide receivers, and they both landed in pretty crowded situations. CeeDee Lamb in Dallas, Jerry Jeudy in Denver. So I'm willing to take both of those guys, but probably honestly not as early as they're going in ADP. Jalen Reagor would actually be my rookie wide receiver one from a redraft standpoint. And I mean, we know the Eagles last year, their wide receiver core was just decimated. Alshon Jeffrey got hurt. Deshaun Jackson got hurt. Nelson Aguilar got hurt. By the end, they were starting Greg Ward as their top target at wide receiver, the former quarterback. So, and I'm still not sure Alshon Jeffrey even makes that week one roster. So Jalen Reagor, looking at the rookie receivers, he's the player I think can come in and be, he won't be this number one target that's probably still Zach Ertz, but I think he could be the number one wide receiver on the Eagles roster. Beyond him, the other player that stands out that I think could make an immediate impact is Michael Pittman in Indianapolis. And I don't have his ADP in front of me, but I'm sure it's pretty cheap in redraft.
I'll snag that for you while you're talking about him.
Cool. Yeah, you think about, and I mean, the Colts were kind of in a similar situation to Philly last year, that they didn't have a ton of wide receivers to start with, and then T.Y. Hilton goes down with the injury, and Zach Pascal is basically like their top guy. Paris Campbell struggled for them, just as J.J. Arcega-Whiteside struggled for Philadelphia. So similar stories. I do believe kind of the recent hype that Hilton's back, he's healthy, he's going to be still the wide receiver one and the top target on that team. So I don't look at Pittman as the top option in Indy this year, but I do think he could certainly be second, especially when they lost Eric Ebron as well.
So you're not worried about Campbell over Pittman?
Not really. I'm worried about Campbell as a dynasty asset. I'm worried that he never really it never really clicks for him. But okay. I mean, I think Pittman is the more pro ready receiver.
All right, I was cheating. I was asking that one for myself since I have him on a roster. All right. So we're going to sign off here. You said you can be found at a million places. Ryan McDowell 23, DLF, all over the world. I can be found on Twitter at Bob's Three Toad, on YouTube, Bob's Three Toad Warriors. Listen to new shows that drop on Monday and Thursday mornings on YouTube and everywhere podcasts can be found. And you can watch the Fantasy Football Hump Day Happy Hour on Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Central. I have thoroughly enjoyed having you on the show, sir. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it as much as I did recording it with you. And I thank you for that. And that's all for this show. It's been Bob's Three-Toed Warrior and Mr. Ryan McDowell, reminding you soon enough you'll be able to hit the waiver wire, set your lineup, dominate your opponents. But until then, see you.